Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I was a model Catholic student from the time I was born in 1957 until I graduated in 1975. I attended Holy Rosary School until 8th grade when I graduated. In 2nd grade, I was an altar boy who could say the Mass in Latin. I was given all of the sacraments. Father Constantino, bless his soul, the pastor of our congregation, was directing me toward the seminary until I reached 6th grade and discovered that as a priest, I would never be able to, I don't believe so, Father. The priesthood must not be for me, because I will undoubtedly sin if I become a priest. Thus, I was prepared to be a happily married Catholic congregant during my junior and high school years, which lasted until 1975. In June of 1975, I graduated from high school. I was 18 years old at the time. For my first year, I attended Housatonic Community College. In my English literature class, I chose to read and report on Life After Life, a book by Dr. Raymond Moody about NDEs. This book was a collection of NDEs from Dr. Moody's practice, which he started in the late 1960s after his doctoral thesis was approved. By 1975, he had amassed enough first-hand accounts of his clients to write his first book. I was 18 years old at the time and more than dubious. These claims needed to be explained. I wrote the paper on Life After Life, and I questioned the entire procedure. These NDEs must have been induced by drugs, hallucinations, or merely imagined. If they were true, I would have heard about them in our religious classes, which I had faithfully attended. NDEs did not exist in my universe. The topic of near-death experiences piqued my curiosity. While my best friends were reading books like Kurt Vonnegut's Fahrenheit 451 and Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, I opted to take a different approach to science fiction. I read about near-death experiences. The NDE genre had flourished 20 years later, in 1995. Dr. Moody's Life After Life was my first book. I continued to read books about NDE experiences written by other psychiatrists and psychologists, including Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Linda Backman, Dr. Kenneth Ring, and Dr. Peter Woodbury, to name a few. These doctors earned doctorates from Harvard, Yale School of Medicine, Northwestern University, Boston College School of Medicine, and Stanford University, among others. They completed residencies at some of the country's most respected hospitals. Dr. Weiss was the psychiatry director of Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami. The 7 stages of mourning were developed by Dr. Kubler-Ross. These authors are psychiatrists and psychologists who spent their first 10 to 30 years of work according to mainstream dogma and beliefs. They were also sure that these NDEs were caused by a mixture of medications, hallucinations, or the mind playing tricks on a person's consciousness. During the 1970s and the 1980s, psychiatrists and psychologists still reported that there was an explanation for these NDEs, that they couldn't pin down, but that they couldn't be real. In fact, some of the good doctors claimed that these were not genuine and could not be real, and that medicine will finally figure out what the real answer was. During the 1970s and the 1980s, the psychiatric area of medicine was ready to undertake studies on the legitimacy of NDEs at mainstream colleges and universities. No doctor who earned their degree outside of Battle Creek, Michigan, would claim to have had similar experiences. Meanwhile, during the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, there were MDs and surgeons who were having their own NDEs, as Stephen Colbert loves to say. Eben Alexander, MD, Michael Sabom, MD, Mary Neal, MD, and Penny Sartori, RN, were among them. These people were having NDEs then returning to write books about their experiences. These doctors did not experience drug-induced hallucinations or delusions. They would explain the distinctions between hallucinations and NDEs. Whether it was a drug-induced hallucination or a normal hallucination, whatever that is, these clinicians would be careful not to classify these encounters as hallucinations because they were plainly not hallucinations. Regardless of how vivid the experiences were, they were not dreams or dream states. Finally, by January 1998, there were individuals who had discovered the NDE experience who are not at all associated with the medical industry. Anita Moorjani, Betty Eady, Joel Fisher, April Crawford, Cynthia Rose, and Heather Hunter all have written about their own NDEs and personal histories. These people created books on their NDEs just to claim that the experiences were real, that the afterlife existed, and that God's love and life were very real. They intended to reassure the public that no matter how good they believed God was actually even better. These encounters were now taking place because the medical industry was saving more lives than ever before. The medical profession had achieved some remarkable advances in the 1950s and 1960s, and they are now able to save lives that they had never been before able to save. Because modern medicine was able to preserve their lives, some of the people came back to life and had these experiences. People who had these NDEs were publishing novels in the 1980s and 1990s that couldn't have been written previously because they couldn't have been saved. They were now able to be saved, and more would be saved and return with these stories. That was pretty much my experience. In the 1990s, I developed a brain tumor. The neurologist believed it began around 1994 or 95 and peaked in size in December 1997. On December 10, 1997, we received the first images of the tumor, which was the size of my fist. That would have required around half the size of my brain on the inside of my skull. When we look at the photographs of my brain, we can clearly see the shape of the brain, with lobes and so on the right side. On the left side of the same image, there was only a circle, a distinct circle in it. Why was that part of the brain represented by a circle, I wondered. The doctor emphasized that the circle did not represent anything. It was my brain tumor. It was engulfing the entire left side of my head. It had gradually pushed the left side of my brain to the right, until it was exactly close to the right side of my brain. If left alone, it would expand until it pushed the brain so far that it would kill me. The doctor also noticed that the blood supply to my tumor was very strong. Therefore, he told me that the growth was nearing its peak. It was increasing quicker than when it began, faster than 2 years ago, and faster than a year ago. The doctor predicted that it would kill me by June because it was already occupying half of my cranium. The month was December. The neurosurgeon asked me to go home and organize my belongings before returning the next day for the tumor removal surgery. I was completely aware of and convinced of the gravity of the situation. I was not at all concerned. Just 12 hours earlier, when my wife picked me up from the hospital and I was told I had a brain tumor, I was truly happy. The physicians informed my wife that I could no longer drive. My automobile was a 2-ton missile that was just waiting for me to lose control due to the very real threat of a seizure. The physicians in the emergency room asked if I had any seizures, and I had no idea what they were talking about. A convulsion? Like when I lost consciousness and started shaking, and I appeared to be possessed by everyone in the room? That kind of convulsion? Yes, the physicians confirmed. That was all. But I could claim with clarity that I had never experienced a seizure. Never. I inquired as to what would cause me to have a seizure, but they promised to answer all of my queries when they conferred to make their recommendation. So I sat on the ER bed, still whistling a joyful tune because, as far as I was concerned, no bad news had been conveyed. The physicians returned to tell me that my wife would be fetching me up from the hospital and that she would have all the instructions I needed for doctors and drugs. I had no inquiries because I didn't know the outcome of the gravity of the issue. My wife's instructions were in my head. I planned to go to the doctor's office tomorrow, grab a prescription or two, and then go about my business. At this point, I guess the word that springs to mind is oblivious. I was completely unaware of my illness, the brain tumor in my head, and my entire circumstance. I knew something was wrong, but it didn't bother me in the least. In my first 40 years, I had spent a lot of time in hospitals getting procedures, and this was simply another one. When my wife arrived at the hospital, I would obtain the information. To say the least, I wasn't thinking straight at the time. I was cool, calm, and collected, but clarity was not my strong suit at the time. The doctors assured me that my wife would be waiting for me at the hospital, but it didn't occur to me that I had driven there from the morning clinic. Why couldn't I just drive home if I had my car? The doctors made it very clear that I was to go home and prepare all of my belongings for a hospital stay, because when the doctor saw me in the morning, he would most likely tell me that I would be checking into the hospital for another operation to add to the appendectomy, tonsillectomy, hernia, and knee surgeries that I had already had. I'd had my fair share of hospitalizations for surgery, and this would be no exception. I had no idea what it was for. In retrospect, I feel the doctors in the ER were neither anxious nor excited to inform me the diagnosis. I'm thinking it's just another normal surgery, but they realize it's quite dangerous. After informing me that I would be returning home to get my belongings for the hospital stay, they advised me to wait for my wife to arrive before leaving. There were no questions, no answers, no prognosis, and no determination. The doctors were unwilling to have that discussion with me, so they delegated it to the neurosurgeon who would be meeting with me in the morning. The doctor would leave the prognosis and such to him. They did advise me to go to the ER waiting area and wait for my wife, so a nurse led me to an ER waiting area with a bed, and I was instructed to sit on the bed until my wife arrived to pick me up. The ER doctor entered my room as I sat on the bed waiting for my wife. Dr. Ferreira was not on the original doctor's council, therefore I hadn't met him. Yet, when he entered the room and introduced himself, I immediately recognized his Italian accent because I'm a first-generation Italian who was raised to speak Italian. I was given the language and the accent as a gift. So when Dr. Ferreira introduced himself, I immediately smiled and asked him where he was from in Italy. When he said Sicily, I smiled even wider because my father was from Sicily. I told him my grandmother was from Reggio Calabria over the sea. My mother was from Frosinone, a suburb of Rome. We spoke briefly in Italian, and it was wonderful to see someone from the old country who had done so well in America. Dr. Ferreira's expression became solemn. "Do you know why you're here?" he inquired. I told him about the MRI, how I arrived at the hospital about noon and had to wait forever for the MRI, how I waited in the MRI waiting area, and how the physicians told me my wife would pick me up and sent me here to the ER waiting room. Then I asked him if he knew what all of this was about. He was surprised that none of the doctors had approached me about the matter. He particularly inquired if I had seen the doctor who performed the MRI, but I told him no, I hadn't even seen that doctor. So, Dr. Ferreira revealed that I had a brain tumor the size of my fist that was interfering with and causing many of my problems. The brain tumor was the source of my difficulty finding words, even in English. The brain tumor caused my incapacity to speak at times. I had been tripping on my right toe repeatedly, ostensibly in my mind because I was now 40 years old and growing increasingly clumsy. The doctor assured me that I would be that clumsy later in life. Just now, it was the brain tumor that was causing me to trip because I wasn't walking and elevating my leg enough. The headaches I had never had before turning 39 and that I was having a few times a month were most likely caused by the brain tumor. The other doctors had Dr. Ferreira make an appointment to see Dr. Hitchcock in the morning at 10 a.m. because it was huge, even massive by brain tumor standards. My wife left a message regarding the appointment, so I should confirm it with her as well. Dr. Ferreira and I had a pleasant visit after that, but he quickly stated that he needed to do his rounds in the ER. He would answer any questions I had. Otherwise, I should continue to wait for my wife. That is exactly what I did. I now understand what the diagnosis was. I could see my wife approaching the ER room from down the corridor in no time. I smiled as she neared the room, waiting for her to enter before greeting her. I continued to smile as I kissed her hello. She was now quite serious, stating, "They haven't yet informed you? What is the problem?" They had told me that, I assured her. I told her about Dr. Ferreira and the doctors who came before him, and she asked again if I knew what was wrong. I informed her, "Yes, my brain tumor is the size of my fist. We'll see Dr. Hitchcock tomorrow to see what he thinks about it." She kept looking at the cat that ate the canary smile on my face and questioned why I was smiling. I think she said something like, "Have you already lost your mind?" It was then that I realized she wasn't inside my thoughts and wasn't thinking the same things I was. I informed her, "I'm not depressed at all. That is fantastic news. I knew I wasn't depressed when I went to the clinic, but I went to find out why I was having these problems. I've got a brain tumor. They can operate on it and remove it. Then we'll see how I'm doing after the surgery. Or I may die. However, it is not depression. They don't know how to treat depression. You can be depressed for a day, a week, or for the rest of your life, and you'll need medication to keep you there. Depression is caused by a chemical imbalance. I have no chemical imbalance. I've got a brain tumor. Let's try it and see where it takes us." We checked out of the ER and headed home after that. My wife and I arrived at Dr. Hitchcock's office next door to Swedish Hospital at 10 a.m. the next day. He performed all of his procedures at Swedish Hospital. Thus, his office was right next door. When we arrived, he examined the MRIs and informed me that this was a very dangerous operation. He would do his best for me, despite the fact that the brain tumor was the largest he'd ever worked on. "What is the prognosis?" was my only inquiry. Dr. Hitchcock went on to talk about his experience with brain tumors, how he became the most well-known brain tumor specialist. He had operated on many brain tumors and promised to do his maximum best with my brain tumor. But on December 11, 1997, I was curious about my prognosis. How likely am I to survive? What is the likelihood of waking up drooling? What are your chances of getting a lobotomy? What are my chances of waking up completely normal? But Dr. Hitchcock refused to answer my queries, ostensibly because he didn't know what my odds were. He told me once more that he would be on top of his game. He promised to give it his all, that I was in the hands of the best neurosurgeon in Denver, and that we would do our best. Much of what I was asking was speculative. The brain is an enigmatic organ. Dr. Hitchcock promised me that he would try his best. That was insufficient for me. I looked to my wife, believing the doctor wasn't getting my inquiry. I tried to persuade my wife to give me a doctor's range: 10 to 30%, 30 to 50%, 50 to 70%, 70 to 90%, more than 90%, 10% or less. I had to know. My wife glanced at me and said, "The doctor said he didn't know." I stressed that I require some sort of range. When she inquired why, I became a little flustered. I told her I'd let them know once they'd given me a number or a range, but I needed to know right away. Hearing this dialogue, the doctor interrupted. He informed me that he did not participate in the game. He'd do his best, but he wasn't going to offer me a percentage of survival, which was what I wanted. He would never do something like that. So, turning back to the doctor, I questioned, if he wouldn't even offer me a range, What would be the ramifications of conducting the operation in late January or early February instead of this week? The doctor advised me that we needed to complete this as soon as possible. This is not a basic or minor brain tumor. I've never seen a brain tumor this big before. I now have the information I required. If the doctor had never seen a brain tumor of this size on a living patient, what he was stating was that of this size on a dead patient. He regarded me as a living patient. He might have seen them this large or half this size on a deceased patient. So I informed him that the operation would have to be scheduled for late January or early February. Dr. Hitchcock thought I'd die by June. He didn't have much doubt about it. Why would I want to put off the surgery for a month? Every day makes it a little bit riskier. I now had all of the information I required. I'd be dead by June. There was a chance in January, but it was more likely than in June. I said to my doctor colleague, if I die on the operating table tomorrow or this weekend, my 1-year-old daughter will remember Christmas as the time of year when her father died. That will be my only daughter's legacy. That is not what I'm looking for. If the surgery is completed in late January or early February, Christmas will be over. Dad may have died, but not over the holidays. My daughter, not having to deal with my death and the Christmas season simultaneously, will provide me solace, and it will allow me to see her for the last time on Christmas, assuming I survive the following 2 weeks. Doc, I need to make the best decision for my kid because you don't play that game and won't inform me. Dr. Hitchcock's mood shifted 180 degrees. He was relieved since, as he explained, my brain tumors are notorious bleeders. You can go to the blood center for the following 4 or 5 weeks and donate your own blood, eliminating the possibility of rejection. I donated blood every Friday until the surgery. My daughter was cared for, and I've had a dozen Christmases since, which brings me to my near-death experience. Christmas, January, and blood donations all went as planned. My brain tumor was removed, and I had my NDE. And between falling asleep in the operating room due to the intravenous concoction and waking up at 2 a.m. the next day, I'm not sure if it was throughout the full period, 5 seconds, or something in between. Here's what I know about it and what I've gleaned from it. I did not enter the tunnel. I didn't go in the direction of the light. My first thought was that I had already arrived. I was walking through a field filled with the most gorgeous flowers, plants, and trails I'd ever seen. It was stunning. I believe you've heard this before. It's difficult to express. But there I was, strolling down the walkway to a cluster of buildings at the far end of the field. I notice I'm not alone as I travel along. I'm on foot with one of my guides. I don't recall his name, but it wasn't earthly or something I'd heard before. It wasn't the same as Fred, Charles, or George, but I recognized his name, and he recognized mine, and we were strolling together. We both understood why we were headed toward the structures. We were on our way to a meeting with my master to see what would happen next. I was worried since I was expecting a life review at this point, but I also knew I shouldn't question it. Eventually, I realized that there would be no life review because my life was not yet done, and it would not be over for at least another 50% of the time. My guide and I were on our way to meet my master at one of the buildings. At that moment, we needed to make a decision. Actually, it was my choice. Nobody wanted to do it for me. Nobody wanted to be a leader. I had to decide whether I wanted to return to my body to raise my unborn baby. He was due in November of 1999. I'm not sure why I had this event besides as proof. I had planned to live this life, and in 1997, I was given the option to leave. Before I came into this life, I was determined to raise my son. I was determined to raise him for the first half of his life. When I awoke, I resolved to be with him for the rest of his life. He's currently a junior in college and 22 years old. I returned to the field with my guide to walk back to where I came from, but I have no idea where or what it is. Suffice it to say, I awoke in my body on a respirator in the ICU around 2 a.m. I returned with a better understanding of what was on the other side of the veil. It's not as mysterious to me, but as I've learned from my 40+ years of reading about NDEs, it's a learning experience. I feel I will continue to grow for the rest of my life. I'm grateful for that.